Hi everybody. Okay, checking everything to see if we are good. Everything looks correct. My camera looks right. Okay, so we are back and we are going to talk about ascension cycles and soul contracts today, which has been we talked a little bit. I don't have the chat up. I'll put the chat up in about 25 minutes. I want to get a couple topics out and then we can go into Q&A if anyone has questions. So when we talked a little bit last time about dismantling collectives and how the collectives fall and how you have some people that their role in a sense is to disrupt the collective from within. Now, I never feel like that role is going to last forever because you really can't implode it from within. You just kind of leave it and we go create something else. And then eventually a lot of people leave that collective and then the collective falls. You can see this all out history of what people used to believe and then realize that didn't make a lot of sense. Is their human consciousness even in that point raised? Their consciousness is always rising. It's always going to increase. Even if you're in a human-based consciousness, you're still going up. You're still becoming more aware. Just the speed of which you do it is going to depend on the speed of which your contract is to do it. And I'm going to say contract there because we do have a contract with Ascension in a sense. We have encoded in our DNA when we're going to start to ascend. And if we choose that, or if we choose not to, and if we choose to go to a different, do it elsewhere, which means by physical death, well, we'll go do it elsewhere, but everyone will ascend. And if it won't ascend here, then it'll come back in another body that will then ascend in that way. So touch on that a little bit. I don't want to get too bogged down on something that might feel kind of depressing today. I want to try to keep it light. Some of these can get a little sad. And ascension is not sad. Well, it is sad to our humans sometimes because we have to let so many things go. But it can be fun too. There are fun sides of it when you start to understand how things are working. You start to see the different contracts. So we talk a lot about pulling out of the collectives, kind of bringing in a new collective and focusing on that new collective. And you see a lot in the school systems too, where a lot of people are pulling their kids out of school for one reason or the other. And if you had children in the school systems in a lot of these moments, and you are doing your ascension process in these times, a lot of people are pulling their kids out to start something new. And so that's kind of an example of what I'm talking about by starting something new. There are some people that haven't really started their ascension journey and they're still pulling their kids out because they don't like the consciousness. They might not realize that's what they're doing, but they don't really like the consciousness of the school and they want to go do something else. So is it the highest of the highest timeline? No, but it's still higher than where they were. And that's when we get into human consciousness and ascended consciousness, and that's kind of the difference. You might do something and it's going to lead you to a higher timeline, but it might not be the highest of the highest timeline. You're not able to really see those yet until you get to certain states in your consciousness where you can see the highest of the highest timelines. And you're not able to do that in the beginning. You're going to be kind of locked into one view. You're going to be kind of locked into and a little bit more making your decisions from your human aspect. You're not going to be making as many decisions from your higher aspects because they're not the ones making the choices. You still could be making them from, it's a conscious choice, but still from an unconscious program. And we have talked a little bit about that on here before. You're making a conscious choice to do something, but you're still running an old program and that's your motivation. So it's a conscious choice from an unconscious program, which kind of is going to lead me into soul contracts, which is kind of, I don't really know how we got on that other tangent. I don't really know where I was going with that. So we're just going to go into soul contracts and, I know where I was going with that. I remember now. Okay. Pulling out of one collective to the other. Now, when you deal in consciousness, when you look at a lot of people that are doing it, all across the globe, everyone's in a different place, right? Everyone's in a different place with it, whether they're in the twin flame matrix programming, they're in abundance, abundance karma, or even in the abundance matrix, you could even call it that. You can get into the secret and a lot of stuff that focuses more on physical abundance. That's kind of like an abundance matrix in itself. You could be in just your human matrix and not really the subsets of the other matrix. You can be into your twin flame matrix. And a lot of people are in different levels of consciousness. There's a reason for that. Everyone's coming through at different times. We've talked before about the 10-year cycle, how you have 3 waves kind of in each cycle. Like you had 3 waves that came in from 2010 to 2020, and eventually that all collapses into the first waivers. And then you have the new waivers that come in from 2020 to 2030. And then that'll collapse into the second waivers. And then it's going to go on and on and on and on from there, until you have more people on the planet in some part of their consciousness journey than not part of their consciousness journey. And you can see how it does get more over time. Now, as that process happens, you have a lot of people in different places. And you need to, because a lot of their people who they're going to help bridge some of the new earth realities, or bridge some of the higher aspect realities, your higher consciousness realities. When everyone's in a different place, you need different people speaking from those different places, right? Even though what they're speaking might not be the highest of the highest aspect of them. I know I did videos long ago where I would never look at it now and say that was my highest aspect of my highest consciousness. It wasn't. It was the highest I could get to at the time. And I leave them up because someone who's in that place would probably look at that video and it would assist them. Whereas talking to me now, if they're not in a certain place, I might not resonate with them now. But maybe 5 years ago, I would. And that's why you will find with a lot of the work you'll put out that sometimes stuff you put out 3 or 4 years ago starts getting traction, 3 or 4 years later, because that's when the collectives start to find it. And the collectives start to, it's kind of like in the Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. But sometimes you have to build it for a long time to get so much momentum where people can find you easily. Because when you're dealing in these types of realities, you're not allowed to advertise. You can't really promise anything, because if someone comes to your work and they're not in a certain place, they're not going to see themselves getting anything out of it. They're not going to see how maybe I took that course, or I did that session, or even I listened to these podcasts or streams or whatever you're listening to, or I read that book and nothing happened. Because as a human, we want it to happen right away. And if nothing happens right away, we're like, well, that shit didn't work. It was a waste of money. Sometimes just spending the money on stuff that's going to expand you and activate your soul, in a sense, to embody in your soul, that's the activation. You don't have to read the damn book. You don't have to take the damn course. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you might feel like you do. Sometimes you don't have to. The activation is actually just paying for it, to showing it's important, to showing your universe, your higher aspects that this is a priority for me. Like, I want to do this. It's not really about the course. Now, you might look back years later and go, at the time I didn't see it, but I can look back now and go, wow, that course really did help me over the next 2 years. I can see all the stuff that happened after I did that course, after I did that session, after I read that book. And it really did open things up for me. But at the time, I didn't see that immediate thing, because a lot of this stuff, well, really all of this stuff, works on a cellular level. You're activating on a cellular level. People even sitting next to you are activating on a cellular level when you're talking, when you're sharing stuff. You can feel the vibration of it. You can feel the caring of it. You can feel why people get out there and do these types of things, because you want to assist everyone in their journey. But you can't really drag everybody uphill in the journey, because people are going to come when they're ready to come. They'll leave when they're in a different place, and they'll come back later, or they might never come back. They might go to somebody else. So a lot of what we do it might not have that immediate thing. Some people it will. It depends on, I always say it kind of depends on how open they are to seeing what it's doing. And I can see more immediate stuff now because I'm just more open to being able to see it now. I have more sight now to see. I do this thing and it immediately opens up something else for me. It immediately opens up a different understanding that I didn't have before. It opens up for me to really see what's aligned and what's not. Is this exciting to me? Do I really want to do this? Some things you kind of know they're aligned if you fear doing them, but there's still an excitement there. But you have a fear of doing them. But you're excited about it. And I have some stuff that comes up that I'm like, yeah, I'm really not excited about that. I really don't have a fear around doing it because it's something I might have been doing for the last 2 years. So it's not like it's not breaking new ground for me. And I might feel like, but I'd rather go do this. You know, we'll be more in a virtual space for a while with a lot of people, getting your work out to kind of the world and making sure you're on a lot of different platforms to be, you know, quote, found, discovered. And then you might find all of a sudden you go want to be more in the community again. You want to connect in the community. You don't just want to connect online. And I know I'm kind of getting more in that phase where I connected online really because of all the COVID realities that came in. It was just easier to do that because of the limits that got placed on so many, you know, countries and states and stuff like that. I always felt like I kind of wanted to be out in the community because I was for years. And then I was like, now I'm not anymore. And then now I feel the pull to kind of go back out in the community and not do more online stuff, which I feel in a way is just kind of repurposing stuff I've already done. And I don't know if that's really necessary. So you can kind of grapple with what feels aligned, and then something might feel more aligned later on. You'll also start to see what you're supposed to do maybe in a year and what you need to do to line up that reality now. So we don't ever get caught with our, I like to say, our energetic panties down. We kind of know what's coming and we get kind of prepared for that. We start finishing out contracts. You know when you're going to leave an area. So you know you have so many things you got to finish out, you know, and you might have, okay, like for the next 8 months, I've got to kind of close out all the contracts I have in this area. I know that's a space I'm in right now. I'm just in the middle of kind of closing things out, closing out contracts with people, which is going to finally get me into our topic, which is contracts. And kind of circle that back around. Because everyone's in different spaces, you see a lot of different information, and it's going to hit you at different places in your process, whether you're pre-ascension, pre-awakening, awakening, post-ascension, full embodiment, oversoul, consciousness. Depending on where you are, there are certain people you're going to gravitate to, and certain maybe years of their work you're going to gravitate to. And then once you get past a certain thing, if they're kind of still in that phase, you don't gravitate to that work anymore because I don't really want to use the word surpass them, but in a sense you kind of do. You kind of just outgrow it and you get into a different phase. Some people say in phases longer because they might be kind of stuck in the matrix. Whenever I hear something about twin flames, and if I listen to something about twin flames and it's this romantic, you only have one, and you know, they're the part of you and all that stuff. That's the belief. That's the matrix of the twin flame. You're in the program, believing the program, but that's really not what they are. But in the level of consciousness those people are at, they're in the program. So they're explaining the program, but in it. Now, if you're in that with them, you're going to really open up to that. And that's going to really assist you in a lot of different ways because you're kind of in the program. But because they're so in the program that you only see a part of the program. You don't really see the whole thing yet. Now, some people get lost in those things for a long time and they don't move through them. So what I will normally do is when I see something that feels like, well, that's one perspective, but I feel like I could do a different one, instead of what you see a lot of people do is they'll try to argue someone's points, right? You see it a lot on social media, more so on social media than you do in person anymore. No one confronts anybody in person anymore. That's like 80s and 90s stuff, you know, no one does that anymore. Now everyone just wants to, well, everyone's braver. Everyone's braver when they're online, you know, than when they're actually in front of someone. That's why a lot of times when it's time to have conversations that feel rougher, we kind of need to be in front of a person. Because you can't do this stuff over text, you can't do this stuff online, but you see a lot of people that are going to argue someone's point. And when we're arguing someone's point, our ego is the one arguing the point. And then everyone gets in their ego about who's right, who's wrong. Nobody's right or wrong. In a certain level of consciousness, everything's sort of true. But that's kind of more of that idea of trying to taking it down from the inside. You know, everyone kind of gets pissed. It's really just a battle of egos at that point. And I learned a long time ago not to let my ego get into an argument about something. And I used to kind of get sucked into them. I would suck myself into them. And now it doesn't matter. You know, it really doesn't matter what someone else thinks in a sense. But that's also their platform to say what they think. And they have their right to say what they think. So if you don't believe that feels true to you, go develop your own. Go start your own stuff and say what you need to say. And there'll be people that are going to gravitate toward what you have to say. So normally, it's really too late to make a long story short, and none of my stories are short. What I'll normally do is when I see something that might not be the highest consciousness a perspective someone can come from, I try to put out a video or I do a stream on a different perspective on it. Maybe a higher perspective on it. It's just a different consciousness perspective on it. I hate to use higher and lower because it feels like, oh, this is right and that's not. It's just a different space to be in. And I saw something on soul contracts that kind of pivoted me to do that. And I have done that stuff on twin flames before when I would see stuff that when people are really playing in the matrix of it's love, it's this pure thing. And twin flame matrix is nothing to do with, it's human love, it's human filling holes. Now there can be beautiful parts of it, but usually the beautiful parts are going to come into expanding your consciousness to realize you come whole within yourself and don't need that type of relationship anymore. Then you try to shift the relationship, but you can't shift that type of relationship unless both parties want to. So it's kind of a morphing into more of a partnership and out of that twin flame thing. But if you get lost in that twin flame thing, oh God, we only have one and blah, 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 then you get lost in it. And it also, you give your power to that other person. I've said before that I have gone through the twin flame matrix and I was always softer with my twin flames when they would always come through in different forms, same energy, but different form in a sense. I did deeper program clearing, so their energy signature was a little bit different, but it was just because they'd hit me in kind of a different level, but I was always softer with them. We'd always compromise for them. We always kind of give up a little bit more for them. It's like a tug of war where we don't plant our heels in as much. Or you might have the opposite, where you plant your heels in too much because you don't want to give an inch at all. So it's a delicate dance when you're in those things. And plus, it was one of the tropes in Harry Potter was love is the most dangerous of all emotions, and human love is. Your higher aspect, pure love on a soul level is not, but human love is dangerous because it does push you to do some pretty crazy stuff. If we all look back and see what we've done, we have been in love, human love, and trying to hold on to a person or stay with a person when it was quite clear that reality was not going to be able to sustain some of the batshit things we did. You see, kind of the point in that. But when I see someone talk about contracts and they kind of put a spin on it like, well, if it wasn't like what you would say is a good deed, it's not really a soul contract. And to me, I don't really see it that way. Everything we do is a contract. Everything we do, we unconsciously agree to. Everything we meet, every role we play. We might have been the shittiest person in that reality, but that was what we agreed to do way before we incarnated here. That's what we agreed to. Now, the thing about soul contracts is when you're in your human consciousness, you don't understand you're operating under a contract. You don't understand that you have agreed to this. That's why you have the urges to do certain things, be in certain places, you meet certain people, you play a certain role out. You might go play the same role out with somebody else. We kind of have this feeling like, oh, it's all fate. No, fate's bullshit. It's not fate. You had a TikTok. You were supposed to be there. And you made it there. And I always say, you'll make your contracts. No matter how unconscious you are, it doesn't matter. You might get dragged there because you don't want to leave one reality to go to the next one. But if you have a contract to be somewhere, trust me, cosmic law will make sure you're there. Whether you are screaming and getting dragged there, you'll be there on time. Because you can't miss your window. You won't miss your mark. You can't screw that part up. You'll be there. You'll play out your role. But if we start to think that, oh, if we try to judge the act, and a lot about soul contracts, we kind of judge the act. We judge what we did in it. We judge what other people do. And we see these kind of horrific things play out, or what our humans going to say that was horrific. Some people have bigger contracts. They just don't have contracts one-on-one. They have collective contracts. And we all, to a sense, have collective contracts about our part in the collective contract. But some people signed up for some pretty, rough rides, in a sense, of what they would do to push collectives forward. Because there are certain acts that enrage the collective. There are certain things people do, certain segments of the population that stuff happens to, it enrages the collectives. They get angry, they want, and they judge the act. In a sense, it was to push the collective forward. It has to be certain segments of the population because that's what pisses people off more. So everything we do, in a sense, is a soul contract. Now, it gets into that, do we even have free will? You don't have free will when you're not conscious. You're just going to do your contracts. And when we're in our human aspects, we're just doing our contracts. That's it. We're just doing our contracts. We check them off on an unconscious level. We go to the next one and we check that one off and we keep going. And we learn something, the other person learns something, and we keep ascending our consciousness just on a slower pace, right? Now, the more you start ascending your consciousness quicker, you start kind of going through your ascension process because it was time for that. You have bigger roles to fill and an ascension role to fill, bringing other people through, helping other people through, assisting other people through. Because that's really all these talks do. And anyone who does this type of thing, that's really all it is meant to do, in a sense, is to just assist someone else in that space. So maybe they won't have as rough ride as I did, or they won't have a rough ride as somebody else did, because they listened to that and was like, yeah, I kind of see, I have more insight, and it'll spawn the insight of maybe something else you could do. So the more conscious you become, you start to understand, and you don't have an unconscious thing going. You don't have unconsciousness playing anymore. You can hear it. It's kind of like you go through that part where you have, the devil and the angel, if you want to even put it in those old tropes, on your shoulder, and you can hear both of them. You don't have an unconscious thing going on. 100% why you're in the reality. 100% you're there to play this role, and you can then decide, is it a point for me to play the role out? Because one thing you're going to realize, the more conscious you become, if something does not have a purpose, there is no point to do it. We don't show up in a reality when we're in our higher aspects to use a person. We're not in the reality to get something. We're not looking at what can I get from this? What can I get out of this? That's not why we're there. We're not in the realities for those reasons. We don't show up like that. Humans show up because they want something. Every time I ever showed up in my human aspect, it's because I want something. There's no higher purpose to that. I want something. Now, technically that's true and not true, because there is a higher purpose in a sense that I am getting something out of it on a soul level. It's just not the reason I think I'm there. I think I'm there because I want something. My human wants something. We show up because it has a purpose. And you're going to start to look at a lot of contracts you had that you might have played out with people for years. And that's when we get into a lot of repeating cycles or different cycles. And we start looking at different things and we're like, wow, do I really need to be here anymore? Am I really playing a part? Can I close out this contract? You're going to find there's always outs in a contract. The more conscious you are, you're going to start to notice them, because you're going to notice when all of a sudden things start to kind of break apart. The contract starts to dissolve because you've filled your role. You've completed what you were there to complete. Now staying, and I noticed that when the last contract I had, when I was in a kind of in that twin flame matrix and clearing that twin flame matrix and getting to the other side of that, the reality started to dissolve. The other person's going to move away. The other person might make different decisions, and you can start to see, or you just get tired of playing the reality. You're kind of past it now. There's no more programming to clear. That's why we're in contracts. We're in contracts to help people clear programming and to help ourselves clear programming. So you start to see that it's not having the same purpose anymore, and I can try to hold on to this, and I can keep going into this, and I can stay lost in this as long as I want to. But it's just going to create realities I'm not going to enjoy, because technically I have another place to be. And the longer I try to hold on to this, the more I'm going to be in a rush to catch that bus for my next one that I got to go do, right? And it's just going to be a really rough ride. If we've ever been in a rush, which all of us at one point have been in a rush, trying to get somewhere and you're late and you wasted too much time somewhere else. Just imagine that stress by like a cosmic stressor level on the stuff that can happen to try to get you in a certain place. You might be talking evictions, bankruptcies, people around you leaving abruptly for no reason, or what you would see is no reason, because you've got to be somewhere else. You lose jobs, you lose friends, because you can't hold on to these realities. And the longer we try to, but when the more conscious you are, you'll start to see it dissolve. You'll start to see it. And that's your cue. that I could stay here, but it's not fun anymore. I had a purpose here. My purpose is done. It's getting clear my purpose is done. I'm not air quote wanted anymore. It's time for me to go on somewhere else. Then you can call the contract done. And any other contract you might see that comes up that is similar to that, you can say, I'm not going to enter into that. That kind of goes into when we look at our timelines. You can see, okay, if I start this here, I see the energy of where everyone in this reality is at. I don't want to do this. This contract, we're going to null and void this. I don't want to participate in this one. We have that power, but we have to be conscious enough to be able to know what our contracts are. If we don't have that yet, you can't just say, oh, that I'm not going to do that. Because you don't even know what they are. You don't even know what you're going to sign up to not do because you don't understand the whole thing yet. We don't understand the parts and pieces. So we kind of morph them into agreements where we kind of lay out the whole reality before everyone starts it. And so you kind of move from soul contracts to soul agreements where, okay, this is a reality. This is what we would like to create here. Is everyone going to be on board with this? And if not, there's no point of starting it. There's no point of starting these realities off if everyone's not going to agree to what we're actually trying to do. What's the end goal of this reality? What are we trying to create? And the higher your consciousness goes, everything's going to be around what you're trying to create. It's not about self-supporting, human selfish stuff anymore. It's not that you won't be supported in what you're trying to do. It's not going to serve a human selfishness anymore. It's not serving those things. You're not showing up because you want something. You're showing up because it's a purpose to this reality. Let's create something. Let's do something. What can we do? And if we show up like that, you're going to start to find that the whole reality is going to shift. Now, there will be a lot of times when you might want to be able to do that, but you also have to be able to communicate that. And that is one thing that our human's not good at open, honest communication because it doesn't want the backlash to what it's going to say. It doesn't want to hear it. It doesn't want it doesn't want it looked down on. It doesn't want the judgment. So it just kind of tries to dip and dodge away from it. It doesn't want to have the talks. That's why the human always repeats things because we don't learn our lesson the first time. So we just go through it again with maybe other people, maybe the same people, because we keep saying, well, we're not quite ready yet. I'm not quite ready to put my foot down on what exactly it is I want out of this reality. And once you can do that, then you can start creating more soul agreements and not so much. And there's a different feeling to the word agreement than contract. Contract, you kind of don't have much of a choice in. But when we're unconscious, we don't have much of a choice. We don't have a choice. Everything's picked unconsciously for you. You don't know what you're transmitting out. You can't hear your unconscious thoughts. Where the more conscious you become, there's nothing hidden anymore. You're able to see, and the vulnerability you're able to see within yourself, that on some level, everyone can see everything about you. Everyone can read your thoughts. On some level, they are. There's nothing they don't see on some level. So it really also makes us kind of clean up our yard in a sense on what we are putting out on every level, because people can see right through it. Even the most person completely locked in their human consciousness and still living out their human realities and really ingrained in that, on some level, they know everything that's going on with you. They might not register it consciously, but you are that exposed. There is nothing to hide. And when you're around people that are more conscious, you can't hide at all. Because then everything is consciously in your face. That's why you'll find a lot of people kind of start avoiding you because they know you can see right through them. And if they don't want to deal with that, they just kind of stay away. So they kind of avoid, those type of interactions with people. So I'm going to open the chat up because I do want to open it before it gets too late. If I don't have another direction to go, I do want to get into cycles a bit and see. Oh, hello. Okay, so I don't have any questions that really are pertinent, so we're going to, but I do appreciate the comments. So we're going to go into cycles, and we're going to go into what our cycles are. and how to start looking at different cycles we go through. Now, I've been in like a reality for the last 3.5 years that I really have not been enjoying very much, in a sense. There are some beautiful parts to it, but there's been some really rough parts to it. And there's been a frustration to kind of move that reality out. And what do I got to do to move that reality out? We become a victim to the reality. Usually for me, what can help is I start venting out all the victim energy I have around the reality. Like, this is a bullshit reality. Why am I still in this reality? It's been 3.5 years. This should be cleared. This should be done. So you kind of get in this phase of getting really fed up with different realities. And normally once I vent something out of the body and I kind of clear that cellular programming, I'm then able to see something else, because all those emotions, all that victim energy gets in our way of seeing what's really going on. So what I could see later, once I had that clearing and kind of had that breakdown for the 15th time, I think, over this, probably more than that, I was able to see how this kind of corresponded to another situation that I was in prior to this one, where I was in a job for like 3.5, close to 4 years, but it was around that time frame. And I hated this job. It was my last kind of linear job I had. I had nothing to do. I was so bored. And every year the job would kind of get moved out a little bit more, where I'd have a little bit of reprieve where I wouldn't have to go in. And toward the last like 2 or 3 years, I never even went into the office. You know, I never went into the office. I didn't have anything to do, but I was still there because this job completely supported the reality I was doing. I had a lot of time to work on raising my consciousness. I had a lot of time to work on different, doing different things in this type of work, figuring out what I wanted to do, getting my vibration up, getting my consciousness up. And so it gave me that time with basic and the money, great money, right? And it supported me fully. But I was so caught up in wanting the next thing, because that's my human wanting that. It's like, when can this be done? When can I go on to be doing something I'm going to enjoy? Because there were limits on this reality. I was still technically working. I still had to be technically available from 8 to 5 every day, even if I really have nothing to do for years on end. I still had to be there in case someone needed something. So it's not like I could go travel to Europe, or do anything like that, because I had to be there. So and it was a vibration that, even though it had been moving out of my reality over the years, it was still in my energy field, right? So part of me knew on some level, even though I was not as conscious as I am now, I knew it couldn't last forever, right? I mean, there's no way this could last forever. But until because when it would try to end, the most craziest stuff would happen where it wouldn't end. Like it was like these movies where the telegram, comes in at the last minute, or the superhero save in the last second right before the whole world explodes. There was just this most bizarre stuff that kept happening over and over and over again to keep extending this thing out. And there was a lot of frustration, very similar to the frustration I've been feeling about this reality I'm currently in and what I was clearing in this reality. But I could start to see how that reality carried me to this one. And when that reality was going to start to limit the next thing I had to do, then that reality ended. And it did finally come to an end. Now, there's something about a 3 to 4 year cycle where we're clearing programming, we're destroying our old human templates, we're rebuilding new templates. And even in a lot of different aspects of those years, I could see other things that played out. I talk a lot about the 2 to 3 year cycle on here, but you might find that fits into a bigger cycle of more like a 3 to 4 year cycle, where I might have seen a reality teeing up for 2.5 years, and then it physically was in my reality for 1.5 years, and the whole thing kind of played out over 4. So you might start to see this 3 to 4 year cycle in a lot of things, because it takes that amount of time to clear out old stuff, to build up new stuff, to go to the next thing. Now, when you're starting to be able to see that, and you get to the piece I got to with that other reality, that old job, is at the end, I was like, whatever. It didn't matter. I was like, at some point it'll end. At some point it'll end. And I'm going to let it go till it ends. And that was kind of my agreement I made. Like, I'm not going to fight to hold on to it. I'm going to let it go till it ends, because it seems weird I'd say fight to hold on to it, but in a way you are fighting to hold on to it, because at the end, when it did end, there was also this fear of, okay, well, how am I going to support myself? That supported me. This stuff wasn't supporting me at that point. So what's going to support me? What am I supposed to do? And it catapulted me into a lot of different decisions I had to make later on, including selling the house, moving, to kind of support the next leg of my journey. But you had to kind of get to a certain point energetically to then go into, I'd been in a phase where I was in a expanding my consciousness, holding that consciousness, and then I had to go into what they would call like an embodiment phase, a soul embodiment phase, where you're embodying in those higher aspects, right? But you can't go through soul embodiment unless you're in certain places, right? You have to be in certain places that are higher vibration. So I had to kind of be here. If all that stuff hadn't happened, I wouldn't have ended up here. Everything kind of makes sense when you look back on it. Hindsight is always 20/20. You're always looking at it from a higher consciousness back, and you can understand, okay, it had to play out that way. It was time for me to go from holding my consciousness to embodying my consciousness and clearing out. And I was going to go through what they call abundance karma clearing, which is a phrase that was coined by like Lisa Transcendence Brown, who does amazing work. And she kind of coined that phrase. It's abundance karma clearing. So you're clearing out all your abundance karma from this lifetime and every other lifetime you've ever been in. And you can have to deal with having very little money, having to, ask for assistance when you really weren't usually doing that because you're able to support yourself, and having things kind of come in at the last minute, and learning what the value of money is, what you really needed and what you really didn't need. And through a lot of those journeys, you kind of start to see a lot of those experiences, you start to understand, you clear out programming, but it can get frustrating. Just like my other job had gotten frustrating, that other cycle got frustrating, because on a human level, I wanted it to be done. Still knowing at some point it would be. And I started getting to the same thing with this clearing, where I understood, I know it'll be done because I'm starting to see the next things I have to do. And now this reality is going to start to be a limit. It's going to start to limit me. It's no longer a lesson anymore. It's no longer going to support what I need to do. Money is normally a lesson our universe will use to kind of teach us, how to have a respect for money, what it's for, what you can do, what you support your money with, what you really need, what you don't need, appreciating things that you didn't appreciate before, because you really can't appreciate stuff you've always had. It's kind of an old trope, but it is true. So a lot of people will go through these clearings, and plus when you start going into higher consciousness, that old human money can't come with you. It's karmically bloody in a sense. I mean, it's distorted. You can't take it with you. So every time you kind of even upgrade realities, you'll find all your money goes, and then new ways to support you start to come in. You start expanding out into new ways to support you. There's also a part of that where you get to work on a lot of different channels, because money does motivate you to keep trying different things, to try to bring more money in to support the reality. So you just do a lot of different stuff. You're open to everything because you want to get as much work out as possible. Now, there's a soul reason for that when you're in these phases. And there's that human reason you think you're doing it, because, I need to get money in. I need to have all this stuff you don't want to have the limits anymore, because we do learn to live on very little. It's kind of ridiculous, some of the stuff I've gone through over the last few years. It's comical too when you tell the stories, because people wouldn't even believe it. But your energy is abundant. And you start to realize that money and physical abundance aren't really higher aspect abundance. It's totally flipped. It doesn't really matter, but you will have it. But it's not kind of the same thing. You don't need it to be happy. You can have no money and be so happy. And if you're clearing something, but I might have been in a time where I had money in certain parts of the ebbs and troughs of this reality. I have had money at certain points and then not at other points. But it didn't seem to depict my happiness. It was some stages that kind of eased me out a little bit, because money does make things easier. But there were some times when I had the money, but I was working through a program and I was kind of miserable. And then other times when I'd busted through a certain program and I had no money, and it didn't matter because I was in a different place internally. So the money itself didn't make me happy or not make me happy. It didn't really matter. And you have to go through a lot of this to really understand that. A lot of people will say, oh, I don't think I'll have to go through that. And there's a part of me that thinks you have to go through it to some extent, or you don't learn the value of money. You don't relearn the value of money. If you think you're just going to take your old human life and take the money you'll learn doing higher aspect realities, the money that's going to come in for that, and plug them in to support your old human life, that shit doesn't work. Because your whole life gets rearranged. You can't use that money to support old realities. And I've heard that said a lot, like, oh, and I used to say the same thing because I did it, oh, let me have this money come in and then I'll just start, it'll just take the place of the job I just lost and I'll just continue to do all this distorted shit with my money. I really not have a value for money because we have a lot of judgment around money. We start to also learn that there's more to us than money. Money doesn't we start to realize that we bring more to our reality than money. Someone else might bring the money and you bring something else. But as humans, if we have this feeling, this kind of ingrained DNA thing that if we don't bring money, then we're not bringing anything to the reality. Like it doesn't matter. We're not doing anything, we're not bringing anything. So there's a lot of that goes on to where you have to work through all those distortions. Have people assist you if you've never had that, to kind of get through a lot of that karmic clearing, that abundance karmic clearing, to get through all that. So once you can start to see the cycle, I feel like I'm almost out of the cycle at that point. When you can kind of see the end, you start to see where, okay, I see that this is going to limit me going forward. So it honestly can't continue. And you can start to then ask, okay, what do I have to do to kind of push across the finish line with this, go to the next thing. And you kind of have this peaceful feeling where you get to in that reality. And that's when, you've also burned through a lot of the programming. Because you can have similar situations that happened 3 years ago and happen again, and you could give less than a shit. You don't care. It doesn't matter. Once you've been through something a couple of times, you're like, it doesn't matter. It's all fixable, and no one really cares. So the only one that gets all spun up is me, and no one cares. And I don't even get spun up anymore because I've worked through so much of that programming that it doesn't matter anymore. It just literally doesn't matter. It always gets fixed. The energy will always break. And this reality will morph into something else. But when I was trying to get out of that old reality and wanting that old job to end, I had no idea it was going to catapult me into all this. And there are reasons, I couldn't have seen that because that would not have been something I would have enjoyed. Now, the next thing I see looks a lot more enjoyable now once I get to the other side of this. Different things I'm going to need to do, different places I'm going to have to be, different roles I'm going to fill. But this can't continue, because it becomes a limit. The money is a teaching tool for a while, and it keeps us, it's a leash, get us to do more work. It gets us to value what we spend our money on, really look at what we spend our money on. We can't live on credit. We have to live on cash. A lot of us don't even have credit cards anymore. Sometimes you might get a really small one, kind of like as a little leash in case you have to bridge one reality to the other till cash comes in. But it won't be a big one, it won't be anything like you used to have. And you learn to really look at what you spend money on. Look at what you support. Look at how much you gift. Like if you only had $20, would you gift 15 of that away? Like what's your limit on that? Where are you limiting yourself? Where do you not want to support? Where do you not want to feel compassion? Because when you don't have a lot, you're more apt to share than when you do. That's just how it works. So when you look back at a lot of different parts of your life, you're probably going to see these cycles, and you might be in a cycle right now you're very frustrated with. And when you start to be able to see the next one, you start to be able to see, oh my gosh, this is almost the same timeline I was in before. It's almost been the exact same amount of time. This should be wrapping up soon. 1, because it doesn't bother me anymore. 2, because I know I'm going to be okay no matter what happens. And 3, I can start to see the next phase, and I understand that this is going to hamper me. These limitations have to be lifted because it's going to hamper me going forward. So you're really going to be able to look at the phase you're in, look at the phases you've been in, look at the time frames. And I think you'll start to see how this 3 to 4 year time frame is pretty interesting, even in your human existence, as you can correlate those years and see what you were working through. So I think on that note, we are going to end today. And it has been an absolutely beautiful stream. I've highly enjoyed it, and I'll see everybody next time. Bye-bye.